Hallo zusammen! I think nowadays it's pretty safe to say that people have heard of Till Lindemann, whether they know Rammstein or even when they don't know any of their songs and what they are doing, they just heard of the band and that's pretty much it. They might still know who Till Lindemann is. But when he joined the newly formed band Rammstein in early '94, he was almost 31 years old. So what did he do before he became famous with that band, with Rammstein? Let's take a look at Till Lindemann's early life and careers, because there are multiple ones of them, in a way. Let's find out why. Till wasn't the very first of the Lindemann family to be sort of well known. His father, Werner Lindemann, basically laid the foundation of what Till's later occupation should become: a lyricist, a poet, and a writer. That's exactly what his father was, and more specifically, he became popular by writing Kinderbücher, children's books in the 1970s. Before that, he had written many poems for adults with serious topics. Even though his dad could be seen as a direct influence on his later activities, being a lyricist and poet, they went through many ups and especially downs throughout the years, which can be read about in Werner Lindemann's book Tim, first published in 1988. And as we know now, he actually died before Rammstein actually became a band, and more than that, a thing. But let's jump back in time first and let's look at the early years of Till Lindemann. His mother, Brigitte Lindemann, was a German journalist who worked for the Norddeutscher Rundfunk, one of a few different German public broadcasting companies, for many years. Till also has a 6 years younger sister, Saskia. At 11 years old, he joined a sports school, and from 1977 to 1980 he went to an Internat, a boarding school. It was also around the time that Till started to write his own poems. Many years later, he once referred to writing poems as a fun activity since he does it for himself. Writing lyrics, though, is pretty hard for him in comparison. Aged 12 in 1975, his parents got divorced and lived separately from each other. In his teens, he had developed a strong passion for swimming and was what Germans would call a Leistungsschwimmer, a competitive swimmer, which almost might have started a whole different career for him. After having had first victories in the field of swimming, he even was supposed to swim for the GDR at the 1980 Olympic Summer Games in Russia, but eventually he was forbidden to take part. After having placed second at the Florence Junior Swimming European Cup in 1978, he had sneaked out of the hotel room and got himself porno magazines from the Federal Republic of Germany, the so-called Klassenfeind, the class enemy or enemy of the people. Being a GDR citizen, leaving the hotel was pretty much equal to Staatsverrat or Landesverrat, treason. Now you might be wondering, why? Isn't he German? What is going on? Yes, of course, he is German, but from 1949 to 1990, two Germanys existed. West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, a capitalist democracy, and East Germany, the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, a socialist/communist state. Till was born in Leipzig, a big city in Saxony, and by the time of his birth in 1963, the wall had already been built, which both physically but also mentally separated both Germanies and ideologies even more. You can find out more about this part of German history in my related video, by the way. But even though he was born in Saxony, he grew up in Wendisch-Rambo, a district of the small town Bad Kleinen in the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which also belonged to the former GDR, so he was also a citizen of the GDR. Since both Germanys actually were based on different ideologies and political systems and structures, well, there was sort of an ongoing mental fight in a way, especially on the government level of things. But also, well, sadly in some cases a physical fight. For instance, when people wanted to flee out of the GDR and into West Germany or another country. In 1979, he had to end his swimming career because of an injury early on. In a positive way, maybe German fans of Rammstein might think, gerade noch mal Glück gehabt, just saved by the bell in a way, because if he hadn't had that injury, he might have taken a whole different career path, who knows. He then moved on to work as a Torfstecher, a peat cutter, but that only lasted for 3 days when he got fired. In 1981, aged 17, he refused to take part in the 18-month-long military service, which was mandatory at the time, and almost got arrested as a result. Till continued to work as a Techniker, a technician, as a Zimmermann, a carpenter, or for instance as a Korbmacher, a basket weaver. Musically, he didn't start singing but playing drums in the fun punk rock band First Arsch in the mid to late 1980s, where he also would play some bass and sometimes he even sang a few encores. Roughly around the same time in 1985, his first daughter Nele Lindemann was born. I haven't really found anything specific about the mother, but according to my research, they married shortly after Nele was born and got divorced soon afterwards. That was also the time frame when he first met Flake and Paul, who at the time were playing in the band Feeling B and gave a concert in Hohenficheln, a parish in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, where Till had lived at that point. After having moved away from his dad, he had moved into an acquaintance of his. Led by a mutual friend of theirs, Flake and Paul went to their house after the concert. They partied all night long without really noticing Till as one of the residents all too much though. This changed in the course of the following weeks when they paid them a regular visit and got to know Till better as well. At one point, Till introduced them to Richard, who would also later become a member of Rammstein, and back in the day he was known as Sven. In 1992, First Arsch released their first and only album Saddle Up, where both Landers and Kruspe would also participate in. In 1993, his second daughter Marie-Louise was born as well. By this time, Till was again married, now to Anja Köseling, but they got divorced a few years later. I guess one of the biggest and maybe the final inspiration for starting a metal band was the USA trip of Till, Kruspe and his, at the time, roommate Oliver Riedel in 1993, which made them especially excited and curious about this kind of music. Heavily inspired by that trip, Richard Kruspe wanted to start a new band with Oliver Riedel, who had also played bass in the band The Instaboctables before, and Christoph Schneider. He directly had Till Lindemann as the singer in mind, and he managed to persuade him to join the band. After Paul Landers and Flake had joined, they began playing as the Temple Prayers in 1994, which then would turn to Rammstein Flugschau and eventually to Rammstein. Rumor has it that back then it was Till's main influence that Paul Landers and Flake Lorenz could also join the band in the first place, since he was a big fan of Feeling B and they were quite known in the scene at the time. Yeah, and the rest is history, I guess. To me, stories like these really show that, well, sometimes life just happens and you can't plan it. For instance, as John Lennon also said, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans, and that is totally true. Sometimes, things happen, whether it's an injury or you meet someone and then you take a whole different path, which I think is really, really cool and fascinating. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe you did know most of these things, maybe you have learned something new, I don't know. I surely did learn some new things that I didn't know before. I knew a few things. For instance, I knew that his father was a poet and a writer, and a very popular one in the GDR back in the day. And I knew also that he was a swimmer. But yeah, there is much more to Till Lindemann, even nowadays, than, well, sort of meets the eye of the yellow press at times. And maybe even some Rammstein fans. But I don't know. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to let me know by leaving a like and by sharing this with other people that you know, that also know Rammstein, Till Lindemann, and that are interested in them. That would make my whole day. Thank you very much for doing that, and thanks for watching. I'm your Vlog Dave. Tschüss und bis zum nächsten Mal.